is championship week for your season-long dynasty and best ball rosters. We're here to let you know who you should be targeting on the waiver wire so you can get those trophies and get that check as well. Welcome on to FanDuel Live and the waiver wire Q&A. That's right here on the FanDuel Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Periscope channels. My name is Jim Sanas. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by JJ Zacharias, and he is the editor-in-chief of numberFire and FanDuel. JJ, happy championship week. How you doing today?
I'm good. I see we're both wearing hoodies of losers right now. I have a Hornets hoodie on, and is it too soon to bring that up, Jim?
No, I accepted that they would lose back in October once it became clear they might make it. So I've had time to cope with this. It was not necessarily the most fun day on Saturday, but the losing mentality is just accepted at this point, so I'm all good. But it's opening night of NBA, so you got to be pumped, and you get LaMelo. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's something. I'm very much a casual NBA / Hornets fan. I live in Charlotte, which is why I grew up without a basketball team because I grew up in Pittsburgh, because we don't have a basketball team. It's really just hit basketball. So it's nice to have an NBA team to kind of pull for, but then the NBA team just happens to be one of the worst franchises in that sport. So it's still fun enough. If
we're talking basketball, I could have mentioned that Northwestern men's basketball did beat Michigan State. So I could have gone with the winner angle, but I don't care enough about basketball to go with that route. What we're going to do for today is the same thing as always. If you have questions about your waiver wires for this championship week, make sure you submit those questions via the chat over on YouTube. We will also take questions over on Facebook, Periscope, and Twitch. So get those questions in no matter where you are watching. We'll answer them live here on the air and get you set for your championship week. Let's start things off here over on YouTube with Joey. Finals week, I need lots of help. Okay, so he's asking, should he be playing guys like LeVeon Bell, Darrell, Henderson, Jeff Wilson this week? He's worried about guys like Kupp and Robbie Anderson. So concerns around guys who have helped get us to the finals. We have some guys like LeVeon Bell with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Darrell Henderson with no Cam Akers, Jeff Wilson with no Raheem Mostert. Some potential guys who could be alternatives, but it's also tough to know how much faith to have in them, given we don't really have a sample on them in their current roles. So are guys like Kupp and Anderson, you guys would be willing to bench in that situation if you have guys like LeVeon Bell, Darrell Henderson, and Jeff Wilson as alternatives?
I mean, I don't know about you, Jim, but I would probably put LeVeon Bell sort of in his own tier there. I think that he's in a good enough spot, just given the implied team total that Kansas City has, and even what we saw last week from Lenny Fournette, where he was able to find the end zone twice and save his day. I know he was terrible in terms of everything, right? He was not efficient running the ball, didn't see a ton of volume, but in this backfield in particular, I see Le'Veon Bell as the clear 1A. And if they're going to put up 30 plus points, I think that he's going to have something to do with it. I would assume so. Whereas if you look at a Jeff Wilson, if you look at a Darrell Henderson, obviously, the big thing with Henderson for me is he going to see enough receiving work, because Malcolm Brown has really been that guy throughout the season. So I'm not, I think Henderson's fine as a low end RB2, but I'm not slotting him in super, super confidently. And then with Jeff Wilson, number one, we never see the 49ers backfield go to one guy and have one guy just own a backfield. But number two, CJ Beathard's starting, so we can't really expect the world from that San Francisco offense, even though you could maybe argue that Beathard's an upgrade over Nick Mullins. I mean, I don't think it's that
worse.
Right. I don't think it's that significant of a downgrade per se. But Arizona's defense isn't horrific. I mean, they can at least, I think they'll be able to stop this offense. So I just don't see the scoring environment for San Francisco being that great. So that's why I would put Le'Veon Bell in a tier ahead of those guys. Now, you get to the wide receivers, and you're looking at Kupp, who has a good matchup realistically in the slot. I mean, I think Kupp is the better play between him and Robbie Anderson. Anderson coming off a down game last week, and now he gets Washington, who have been really good defensively. I do worry a little bit about the Washington pass rush too, and what they can do in that game. I think that game just screams lower scoring in my opinion. So I think that this really comes down to a Le'Veon Bell and Kupp. And if it's a PPR league, sure, you can make the case for Kupp and you can make the argument for Kupp, but I still think that Le'Veon's probably a safe-ish bet, just given the fact that I think we can safely project him for about 15 touches in this game. And if you're going to see that in an offense that's facing Atlanta that's going to score over 30 points, that should produce fantasy points.
I think the good thing for Le'Veon Bell is that we do have kind of a sample on him with no CEH. That was a game where CEH sat because of his illness. He was active, he didn't play. Bell had like 65 yards from scrimmage in that game, and that's not great, but like, I mean, in certain situations, that'll definitely work. I think the good thing with Cooper Kupp is the Rams offense isn't really predictable. That may sound bad, but it also means I don't think we should overreact to one down week. They've had down weeks earlier this year and then bounce back the next week with good games. So Cooper Kupp could very well be fine this week. So I think that Cooper Kupp in general is a player I'd be willing to start this week, but Le'Veon Bell is a legit option. So I think that if you have Bell on your waiver wire, definitely go get him because that's someone you could very well wind up starting as we get information throughout the week. Joey also said, I'm in a 2-quarterback league with a lot of my favorite quarterbacks. He has Kyler and Teddy Bridgewater. You're off to a great start there, Joey. What could go wrong? Doesn't like Teddy this week. I don't know about that, Joey. I mean, yes, I agree, but we always love Teddy. My only other options are Drew Lock, Sam Darnold, Marcus Mariota, and Daniel Jones. Mariota's facing the Dolphins. Otherwise, I would be ecstatic about this. But if they're looking for a streaming option, Locke is facing the Chargers. Sam Darnold gets the Browns in kind of a fun game, but it's also Sam Darnold. Daniel Jones facing the Ravens. Would you stick with Teddy there, or would you look at one of the alternatives on the wire?
I think Teddy's probably the safest option of that group, but I would argue that Mariota is probably more of like the high ceiling option there, just given what we saw against the Chargers this past week. Understandably, way easier matchup than what he's going to face against Miami. Miami's defense has been strong. They're the 7th best when looking at adjusted fantasy points allowed. But you're looking at a decent rushing floor potential for Marcus Mariota. Ran the ball 9 times for 88 yards and a touchdown against the Chargers. So at least that's there. But I still think of that group, I would still be going with Teddy. But I do think, you make the point about like Sam Darnold. Like it wouldn't shock me if someone like Darnold ends up outscoring these guys this week. But I think from a predictability standpoint and what we're looking at going into the week, Teddy's probably the play. I say that with hesitance for sure, because it's not a good matchup for Teddy at all. But if you don't want to go with Teddy and if you want a little bit more upside, I do think Mariota offers more upside than Teddy Bridgewater because of the rushing.
I think the good thing with Mariota is that if he's facing the Dolphins with a bad team around him, that's tough. But we've seen Nelson Aguilar play well. Darren Waller's played well. Henry Ruggs should be back off the COVID list this week. So it's actually a pretty good situation for Mariota, which he hasn't traditionally had all that often. So I don't think it's the worst situation for Mariota, which should help him. It's not like the Chargers are bad either. So I think that seeing what he did on Thursday is definitely good for him. It's kitty time. PPR, would you play Giovanni Bernard, Marquise Brown, Benny Snell, over Terry McLaurin if Alex Smith does not play? So I think kind of getting a gauge here on Terry McLaurin. We don't know on Snell yet because it sounds like James Conner may play. Obviously, that put a major dent in him. But Giovanni Bernard looked pretty good in that game and is now facing Houston. What's your level of trust with Terry McLaurin? Would you consider some of these questionable options like Gio or Hollywood over him for this week?
I mean, I think of the two, I'd probably lean Gio a little bit more. But like if you include McLaurin then as well, I'm probably still going with Terry McLaurin. I mean, part of this too is it's the championship, and if I look back and McLaurin does McLaurin things because he's really good, in a game where he should not have a ton of trouble realistically. But if McLaurin has a big game and I bench him for like Gio Bernard, and Bernard doesn't see the same backfield share that he saw against Pittsburgh, then that's going to eat at me throughout the offseason. So I think straight up you should go with McLaurin, but I do think, I have my matchup show coming out tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about Giovanni Bernard in that show because, if you look at what he did against Pittsburgh, he had over 80% of the team's running back rushes. They didn't throw the ball that much, but he still saw an 8% target share, almost an 8% target share in that game. And so if he were to carry over that backfield share into a game against Houston, where Houston's given up 12 top 20 running back performances over their last 9 games. So this is a very much a defense that a guy like Bernard could beat. But keep in mind that we saw, he fumbled against Dallas a couple weeks ago. We saw a rotation there. There's definite downside with Gio Bernard, whereas I think McLaurin is a little bit safer. And
the other thing, too, is there's always that extra juice to try to win against Pittsburgh. Will that juice be there against Houston? Like, they may try to rotate Travion Williams in more in that situation. So that is a concern when it comes to Gio. And if you have legit options, I think that's worth considering at least. Chris, he has Cam Akers, unfortunately. So who would you prefer between Darrell Henderson or Tony Pollard this week? Now, I would say if we get the green light that Tony Pollard would be the lead back, use Tony Pollard over a lot of dudes this week.
Yeah.
Easily over Darrell Henderson. But we also don't know when we're trying to fill out waiver wire questions if Pollard will start over Zeke Elliott for this week. So how are you viewing things with the situation right now if you have to decide between Henderson and Pollard when it comes to waiver wire decisions?
Yeah, so look, if both of them are on your waiver wire right now, I would look and see, do I absolutely need to be playing one of these guys in my lineup this week? And if I have a viable option, I'm going to go for the upside and go with a guy like Tony Pollard. Right now, given the scenario, we know factually that Darrell Henderson is going to be the 1A in that backfield without Cam, because Cam Akers is not playing. Whereas, we don't know for sure that Zeke isn't playing. So the safer bet is Darrell Henderson. If you absolutely need production, I would argue that you should go after Tony Pollard regardless, because you got to go big or go home in championship week. And I think that Darrell Henderson, like I said earlier, is more of a low end RB2. So that kind of production is relatively replaceable. I still think that he's a good waiver wire ad. He's going to be better than most guys on your waiver wire. But yeah, I mean, while I'm talking about this a little bit more, I would probably still go with Tony Pollard. But, let's just say hypothetically you're this like massive favorite and you just need a floor, then Darrell Henderson is probably your play, because if Zeke plays, I don't know how you can confidently play Tony Pollard. Even though, even if they were to come out and say that Pollard's going to see half the snaps, it doesn't really do anything for us. It just hurts both of those guys. So to me, Henderson's a safer bet, but I think Pollard is still the bet, because you have to weigh the upside, and the upside with Tony Pollard is a top 10 running back this week.
The other thing, too, is if you had Henderson and then they announce later that Zeke won't play and your opponent gets Pollard, you're in a bad position.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
I think that would be a difference maker for me with Tony Pollard, is add him, see what happens, and I think you would just kind of take that gamble, unless, like you said, in your situation where you definitely need one of those guys to start. It's Kenny time. PPR, George Kittle or Dallas Goedert if Kittle plays. Could be a Beathard Kittle shower narrative. Yes, The shower narrative is back. The Iowa Hawkeyes dominating the NFC West. If George Kittle comes back, what's your level of confidence in him for week number 16?
Not high. I mean, I would assume if he actually is playing that he should be close to 100% or maybe 100%. But, I'm not that optimistic that he's going to go just because they're not playing for anything at this point, really. Right. Like that they're officially done now. Right.
I believe so. Yeah.
And so, because of that, then because of the fact that CJ Beathard is starting, that's not that great of a situation for him. And Dallas Goedert's not a bad play. I mean, Jalen Hurts looked really competent as a passer this past week. So, in a plus matchup that the offense should be able to move the ball, I would just play Dallas Goedert. And, just one of those things where, we don't know. We're sitting here just talking. We're just going off of our historical evidence of us experiencing this in the past, of these guys coming off injuries. And we know through that experience that, they could play 100% of the team snaps. They could play 2 snaps, right? So it's just a very, very volatile, risky thing. If you were talking about playing like Jordan Reed instead of George Kittle, well, I mean, where they're on the same team like that, yeah, sure, maybe go for upside and play George Kittle. But Dallas Goedert's a pretty good option at tight end that I would feel confident in.
Yeah, if you have a risky option, use George Kittle, because George Kittle, if he comes back and plays his regular role, is going to be amazing. And the other thing, too, is he did practice last week, which I think bodes better for him coming back to a full workload. He's also unhinged a little bit, which might be a good thing for him in this scenario. So it depends on your alternative. And if they also have a bad floor, go with the guy with the ceiling, and that's going to be George Kittle. Joey says Cooper Kupp is barely on the field with Reynolds and Woods and 2 receiver sets. His snap rate was 81% last week. Not sure about that. It's Kitty time. Josh Allen with a banged-up Stephon Diggs against New England, or a red-hot Jalen Hurts against Dallas. So Josh Allen playing really well. Stephon Diggs may not be fully healthy. It sounds like he'll be good to go. But Jalen Hurts is facing Dallas in a pretty enticing game. We have another Jalen Hurts question coming up. So if you want to go just deeper on Jalen Hurts first, you can. Then I'll ask you Hurts versus Allen and Hurts versus other person after this.
It's really hard. It's really hard to figure out exactly where to put Jalen Hurts, because, last week I was really, really high on Hurts. And he exceeded that expectation even. And so I'm sitting here not wanting to go overboard with the way that I view Hurts. But look, the matchup is gorgeous, and he's rushed for 169 yards over the last 2 weeks. And last week he showed how competent he was as a passer too. So all that combined, it just makes me feel like Hurts might be the play. If that Diggs injury is what sort of sets you off of Josh Allen, I think they're back-to-back in rankings this week. Like, I think they're both like top 5 options. So it's really and that's especially true because Stephon Gilmore's out, right? Yeah. If Gilmore were playing, I would easily go Jalen Hurts, I think. But without Gilmore, I'm sort of, it's sort of up in the air for me. Because look, we do still have a small sample on Jalen Hurts. Just to think a little bit more pessimistically about it, we do have a small sample of Jalen Hurts. We could see a situation where the Eagles blow out Dallas. I mean, we could see that with New England too, but and they're not very aggressive. But the difference is that with Buffalo, we've seen them in blowouts and still be fairly aggressive throwing the football. So you can feel a little bit more confident about Josh Allen having that floor. But my God, I mean, Jalen Hurts' ceiling is it's crazy the way that he can run and then obviously now throw too. So That's kind of where I'm at. I think that they're just like back to back. I don't really have a strong answer between Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts.
I think the good thing for Josh Allen is that John Brown should be back this week, but it's close enough where if you have a strong opinion, Kitty Time, go with your gut. It's very close. It's not a huge discrepancy there. But DJ is asking Lamar or Jalen Hurts. Lamar is facing the Giants, and Lamar looking pretty good once again. He's running a lot. The Ravens need to win to make the playoffs. I would have a really tough time sitting Lamar Jackson for Jalen Hurts. What about you?
I would too. I mean, it's just in that similar bucket, similar tier. I think I might lean Lamar. I think I got to see what's going on with that Giants secondary before I confidently do it. Because Bradbury's, he missed last week's game. And so I'd want to see that. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm probably leaning Lamar there, but again, I could make the argument easily that Jalen Hurts is the play.
Yeah, that's kind of where Hurts is, which is fun. But Lamar's tough. Cheyenne, boring kicker question. I have to dig into my single game.
Yeah, I don't even know. Sometimes don't even know kickers at this point.
I know Will Lutz. They're trying to see if they should bench Will Lutz. So I think that digging into like kicker things here, if you have Will Lutz, you can use him because he's at home, big favorite against Minnesota. Yeah. I would say just go Will Lutz. The other names are I don't play any kicker leagues anymore.
Yeah,
it's very weird.
Will Lutz is probably like the kicker 1 or 2 this week, I would imagine.
Yeah. Tweet at CDCarter13 on Twitter. He knows better than me. OBP, should I pick up / start Darrell Henderson over Jeff Wilson, JD McKissic if Gibson is out, or Gibson if he plays? Worried about Gibson not being 100% due to his injuries. We already decided that Darrell Wilson is above Jeff Wilson, or Darrell Henderson above Jeff Wilson. How would you view him relative to whoever winds up starting for Washington at running back this week?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you're in a PPR league, I'd still go JD McKissic over Darrell Henderson if Gibson doesn't play. If Gibson does play, I think that that's enough to probably shift me to Darrell Henderson, but I think that it's very, very close. It's just, we don't know exactly what that backfield share is going to look like if Gibson's not 100%, if he is 100%. So what I would do, because I'm actually going to be in a similar situation in a league that has a lot of flex spots where I have McKissic. Hopefully I can get Henderson off waivers this week, but so the way that I'm looking at it is if Gibson doesn't go, I'm throwing McKissic in there. If Gibson does go, I'm then looking at reports and I'm making sure that I have a general good idea of what type of workload Antonio Gibson might see. And if that's favorable, then I'll switch off to Darrell Henderson. But if it's not favorable, then I think that you can stick with JD McKissic, especially if Alex Smith plays, just because we know that he's a king of dumping it off. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. It's not an easy question to answer right now just because there's so many different scenarios. 2
positives for Antonio Gibson. One is that he did kind of get in some practice last week at the end of the week. The other one is that they need a win for the playoffs. And this is the time of year where that does matter, and they're going to use their best player. And they've shown us they think Antonio Gibson is the best player. So keep that in mind when deciding on Antonio Gibson this week. Nick, Le'Veon Bell or Kenyon Drake for PPR. Kenyon Drake did lose some share to Chase Edmonds this week. His snap rate was still 50%. So it might have looked a bit worse than it actually was for him. But Le'Veon Bell is in a very good offense. So if Le'Veon Bell is on waivers, Kenyon Drake might be your starter. Is Bell someone you could envision yourself starting over Kenyon Drake this week?
I think so. And the main reason is both of them are kind of similar. Right, where and the main difference, like if you think about how they're going to compile points, it's going to be goal line touches and scoring. And it's going to be hopefully catching some passes out of the backfield, where Kenyon Drake started to see a little bit more of a target share. But maybe some of that was because of Kyler's bum shoulder.
Right.
But regardless, he was seeing a little bit more of a target share. But Kenyon Drake, his game is really, let's get 80 yards on the ground, maybe break one and get my yards per carry up a little bit. And then get all these goal line touches and find the end zone, hopefully. But you can make the argument that LeVeon doesn't have the same type of competition in his backfield. And the Chiefs, to me, are going to score or projected to score more points than Arizona is this week. And so I might lean Le'Veon Bell just because the situation appears to be a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that that's probably where I'd go too. I think that the concerns around last week for Drake are enough where Le'Veon Bell might be more interesting there. Nick, tight end dumpster dive for the week. Evan Engram, Irv Smith, Zach Ertz, Jared Cook, Tyler Higbee, Austin Hooper, Jonnu Smith. Basically, who is your favorite streaming tight end for week number 16, JJ?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I don't think you can go with some of the guys that you mentioned. I don't mind Jonnu after what we saw last week, and I think that game could be fun against Green Bay. I think it has the highest over/under.
It's the most fun game of the week.
Yeah. There's a 56.5 point over/under over on FanDuel Sportsbook. But let me throw out another name that I think has just as much potential as Jonnu. I think Jonnu might be the play of the guys that you just mentioned, but I don't mind Austin Hooper this week either. So that game in general has a pretty good scoring environment. I think it's going to be. I think you agree. It's a game that could be higher scoring than folks realize.
We're about to record our betting podcast, and that might be discussed on the podcast.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, with Austin Hooper, he's banged up, and while he was banged up, we saw Harrison Bryant step up and see more snaps, and obviously David Njoku is there too. And they do rotate those three tight ends, and they run a lot of 2 tight end sets too, a lot of 12 personnel. And so that hurts, the number 1 tight end hypothetically. But the thing is, last week, Austin Hooper ran like 15 more routes than any other tight end in that offense. In that Sunday night game against the Giants, he found the end zone. He had a 20% target share. And then this week against the Jets actually are the best matchup in terms of adjusted points allowed to tight ends for what it's worth. I mean, that's not something that I hang my hat on and say you got to definitely play this guy because of this statistic, but it's at least something that's favorable. And so, just given the fact that Cleveland has a pretty high implied team total as well, I think Austin Hooper is actually a really intriguing play this week.
Yeah, I think that Hooper definitely works. Irv Smith is not totally out of consideration for me. 84% snap rate, I think, for him in week number 15. He's shown yardage upside this year, so not bad options there, Nick. So not a total dumpster.
Yeah, I don't know if they've said anything about Kyle Rudolph.
Didn't practice today.
Yeah, okay.
So it's looking like maybe he'll sit, but there's still stuff to break there. If Rudolph plays, that definitely does lower the intrigue in him. But if he's not out there, I think the Irv.
I mean, how are you gonna confidently play Irv Smith if he's battling with Kyle Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, on Christmas?
It's Christmas. Well, he's busy. That's why he's not at practice, man. There's no chance Kyle Rudolph plays. We're good. Mason will be there. Kyle will be there. We're all good. So I think Irv's good to go and take flight on Friday. That is all the time that we have for today here on this waiver wire Q&A and the final one for the year. So JJ, thank you for coming along for the ride. This is a lot of fun. Let's do it again next year.
Yeah, lots of fun, and we're going to have more streams throughout the offseason and such. They just won't be waiver wire focused because the season is ending this week, which I think that we're both we have bittersweet feelings about it.
I'm just ready for playoffs, man. The playoffs this year are looking pretty fun. A lot of good quarterback play, so I'm just psyched for the playoffs. We'll be talking to you here on the FanDuel Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Periscope channels throughout the playoffs as well. So make sure you are subscribed wherever you are watching, and make sure you tune in. And also, good luck to you in the playoffs, and thanks for tuning in for today. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck. Go win yourself some championships. We'll talk to you again in the very near future. This has been the FanDuel Live Waiver Wire Q&A.